All right, aloha, friends. Happy Monday. Hopefully, you enjoyed your weekend. It's game time with the GOSS, brought to you by GM Sports Media and Get Recruited websites. Today, I'm happy to be joined with James Cox, president of the Ezra S. Cox Memorial Foundation and Jim Cox Sales Incorporated. First off, thanks for jumping on, James. Good to see you. I knew your son, Ezra, very well. Can kind of remember the first time I saw him, I think maybe 2017 when Eaton were making those regional final runs. And obviously would see him at a lot of high school sporting events, taking photos. I know he had his own photography website. When did he kind of get started into photography, and where did that passion come from?
Well, Ezra always took a huge interest in what his younger brothers were doing. And he took particularly interest in what his younger brother was doing because Ezra loved sports, as you know. And my youngest son was the athlete of the bunch. Both my wife and I were athletes in college. So we figured when we had three boys, you put my ability with my wife's ability, Jill, and man, we're going to have something. Well, as you know, since you know Ezra had no athletic ability whatsoever. The middle one, his passion was music, but Eason, as a young kid, was running faster than kids that were 2 and 3 years older than he was. So I went in there after watching him play in the backyard one day. I said, Jill, I think we got something here. And so he started playing football at age 8 in the 3rd grade. And Ezra immediately became part of that team as an equipment manager. And then he started taking pictures of his brother during the game. And he also started taking pictures of all the other boys. And so he would start posting these on Facebook and let all the parents download them or whatever they wanted to do with them. And so finally I said, Ezra, people would pay you for these pictures. I mean, that's not out of the question to request that from these people. He goes, okay, what should I, we always wanted to, what should I charge? And so I'd give him advice. And one thing led to another. And of course, when he graduated from high school, he was told his senior year, once you graduate, bud, you can't be on the field anymore. And so obviously he was so used to being on the softball field and the football field, he figured if he can get a press pass as a photographer, then that will get him on the field. So he went to Joe Johnson, the athletic director for NISD, and Joe gave him that press pass that got him on the field to start taking pictures. And that's when people took interest in him other than Eaton. Boyd, he was the team photographer for the Boyd High School football program. Lake Country Christian.
Yeah.
Lake Country Christian. He started doing photo shoots for cheerleading squads and little league baseball teams, and it just kept growing and growing and growing. And the funny thing about that, Brian, is Ezra was really good at it. He had an eye looking through that camera, and he could see some things that a lot of other people weren't able to see. But he took fantastic pictures. Some of the best pictures we have of Eaton Eason during his Eaton high school football career are the ones that Ezra took, and we'll treasure those.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, you took some great photos. Yeah, your oldest son, Ezra Cox, was manager for the football and softball team at Eaton High School before passing away last summer. Just about the Ezra S. Cox Memorial Foundation, official nonprofit charitable organization founded on the principle that no young athlete should be unable to participate in a sport of their choice because of financial hardships. Your mission is to provide assistance to qualified athletes and athletic programs who are in need. Was that decision to create that foundation right away, and just talk about forming that?
It was pretty immediate. That decision was made the first Thursday after Ezra died. Ezra died on a Saturday. And the next Thursday, we had to move him out of his apartment complex. And Ezra lived on the 3rd story of his apartment complex. And it like to have killed me getting everything up into that 3rd story apartment. And so there was no way I was going to lug all that stuff down 3 flights of stairs. So we have what we call our football family, and that's the people that we started with when Easton started playing football. And that's led by a gentleman by the name of Keith Renteria, who was our coach and was Easton's coach his entire elementary school career. But there's a group of those boys, those original boys that we played with, that have stuck together for 11 years now. And we do social events together. We've watched our kids grow up together. We take an interest in what all of our kids are doing. So I decided to recruit my football family to help me get all of Ezra's stuff out of his apartment. So once we were done that day, it was a late June day, so it was hot outside. Boys were exhausted. I was exhausted. I said, look, I'll take you out to eat. So we went out to eat. And I was telling them a story about a kid who played with Eason his sophomore year of high school. And when you have a football family, all the football family sits together at the games because we all know each other. We all know all of our kids. Well, when you get a new kid on the team that you never heard of before, you all say, well, wait a minute, let's learn about him. Where are his parents? You know, and there was this one kid, real talented athlete. I think he was about 6'1" as a sophomore, weighed about 215. I mean, he was just running over those kids, you know, on the JV football field. But I said, who is this guy? And people of our football family kind of looked at me and said, it's the saddest thing you've ever heard of. His parents have never gone to any one of his games during elementary school, middle school, or high school. They will not support him, buy him cleats, or buy him any equipment. His mother thought that if the coach wanted her son to play football that bad, then the school should be supplying the cleats. And Brian, Jill and I, we took such an interest in all of our children's extracurricular activities. And I just cannot imagine, as a parent, not taking interest in what your children are doing. And so the story came around that this kid, the sophomore kid, needed cleats. And Ezra overheard this conversation. And so I didn't find out really later until I was talking to someone else about the same story. And they told me, they looked at me so puzzled. And they said, she said, you don't know this? And I said, know what? And she said, it was Ezra who took him down to Dick's Sporting Goods one afternoon after school. And he told him that he could choose any pair of cleats he wanted on the shelf. And he bought those cleats for that kid that day. And that's just the heart that Ezra had. He had a huge heart. Now, that day, he didn't have any money. So he probably used my credit card to do it. But, you know, that was the way Ezra was in a lot of his life. He had a great heart, but sometimes he didn't know the exact way on how to accomplish what his heart was telling him he wanted to do. And so we were sitting there at the lunch table, and Keith Renteria, the leader of our football family, said, you know what you ought to do is you ought to do something that perpetuates Ezra's name in this community as a charity. And then one of our members of our football family, he's a family counselor. And so he goes, I really like that idea. In fact, I think you ought to do something that from now on, when you hear the name Ezra Cox, you're not lamenting Ezra's death for the rest of your life. When somebody says Ezra Cox or Ezra Cox Foundation, it brings joy to your heart rather than thinking about the brokenheartedness that we had when Ezra passed away. So as it turns out, one of the guys I work with here at Jim Cox Sales, he does a lot of marketing for us. He's got 30 years of experience in nonprofits. And so I pitched the idea to him. He said, well, the way you do that is you file with the IRS in the state of Texas and be set up as an official 501c3. And then that will allow you to bring monies in, doing exactly what our foundation is designed to do. And so that's what we did. By the time Ezra's celebration of life service took place, which you were in attendance, we had already set it up. We had already gotten our letter back from the IRS that recognized us as an official 501c3. And I tell you, Brian, out of all the things that I've done in my life, the last 13 months in giving things away to young athletes in Ezra's name has been the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my life. It just makes you feel so good inside, and it just makes you want to do it over and over and over again. And fortunately, we've had a lot of opportunities to do that recently.
That's awesome. I love that Ezra story at Dick's. Talking with James Cox, president of Ezra Cox Memorial Foundation, and Jim Cox Sales. So it's been a year now with the foundation. Just where are we at now, and what else have you done?
In a little over a year, the Ezra Cox Foundation has raised over $30,000, and a lot of these gifts are people who knew Ezra personally, and it's kind of they have an emotional attachment to Ezra, and so they want to help in some way. But we really are beginning to spread out. We have corporations that have donated money. We have the Ezra Cox Foundation has received donations from 3 countries, the United States, Canada, and the UK, England, to this point. And we're getting to the point where people are recognizing what we're doing. And it's I wish we could have given every dime that we brought in away. I want to have $0 in our bank account because I want everything that's there to be used in the community. But unfortunately, sometimes when you run a charitable organization like this, you got to be careful of people trying to take advantage of you. And so we get some people that contact us directly and say, well, my son needs a football helmet, or he needs $450 for this or that. And my board, the board of the Ezra Cox Foundation, requires me to qualify these kids. So it's an easy qualification process. All I have to do is get a hold of the athletic organization that this child is involved with and talk to the coach or the president of that organization and just verify that the story that I've heard is true. And then, of course, the most rewarding thing is when I get to call the family. I mean, these families are hurting. People who have lost spouses, people whose houses have burned down and they've lost everything, people who have lost jobs and just they don't have the money to pay for it. One of the first instances we had just a little bit after we got started was a mother of 2 girls, elementary school girls. And because of her finances, she was going to have to make a decision on which one of her girls was going to be able to participate in cheerleading last fall because she couldn't afford both. And once I heard about that story, I called the mother and I said, not only am I going to pay for the one daughter that you can't afford, but I'm also going to pay for the other child that you could afford. So you can use that money that you were going to spend on something else, food, or whatever you need. And I'm without a doubt, every time I say on behalf of the Ezra S. Cox Memorial Athletic Foundation, I just want you to know that this is one less thing that you have to worry about. Brian, it's so powerful. It's so powerful. It brings me to tears. It makes me emotional. It brings these families to tears. And then when we do these things, they can't help but tell other people about it. And even though the people that we help may be struggling financially or emotionally, they know people that aren't, that are affluent and have money to spend. And so that's where we've been generating revenue for the foundation.
That's awesome. Just great stuff. Keep it going. That's amazing, James.
Thank you.
Back to Ezra and at Eaton High School. Do you remember his first football or softball game that he was on the sideline or dugout?
Well, it happened pretty quickly. I believe it was the fall. No. He started in softball. He started in softball. And Lynn Rotman was the coach at Eaton softball at that time. And Lynn took an interest in Ezra. You know, Brian, since you know Ezra personally, I don't know if you know this or not, but Ezra, to say the least, and to be real nice about it, was a challenge growing up. It took a lot of work and a lot of patience, and sometimes losing your patience to get him graduated from high school, working full time at UPS, taking pictures, living on his own, and things like that. And so sometimes, because of the struggles that we went through with Ezra as a child and a teenager, I hate to admit it, but Jill and I kind of had a jaded view on who Ezra was. And it seems to me in retrospect that all right, again, Ezra. Every time you saw Ezra, he always wanted to tell you what was happening. What was happening today, or what's going to happen next week or next month or whatever. When he would do that with his mother and I, we would just kind of sit there and roll our eyes, or if he wanted to say, guess what? We'd say, oh my gosh, what happened now? Oh, I don't know if I want to hear this. But one of the biggest things that both Jill and I walked away from the day of his celebration of life was that Ezra was truly loved by people in this community. And he had a huge impact on a lot of people. And I just kept hearing stories for weeks about Ezra after he passed away on how much he meant to people. And a lot of people over and over and over, different people would tell me, Ezra would come by my house every day and just to check on me or to see how I was doing. And it's like, I heard that story so many times. I said, how did he get around to all these places every day? I mean, he didn't have time. But yeah, so when he arrived at Eaton, Lynn Rotman knew of some of the problems that we had had with Ezra while he was growing up. And she said, I will oversee getting him involved in this school, and I will keep him busy, and I will keep him out of trouble. Well, girls softball, high school softball, I said, Lynn, you better keep a close eye on him because he's kind of like a wolf in sheep's clothing. And, and he will, she said, I've got it. Besides that, every one of these girls, they carry around 2 baseball bats with them at all times, and they are not afraid to use them. So we won't have any problems with Ezra. Well, that led to football, and then that led to basketball and volleyball. There was at no time during the school year that Ezra wasn't involved in some type of an athletic program up at Eaton. And as it turns out, it was great for him. It made him really tired at night, so he didn't have trouble going to bed in the evenings. But it also gave him a sense of purpose, and it kept him so busy, he didn't have time to get in trouble. And so that was fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah, just going to those games and just, when I really, I go to games and he knew me, and then I remember Cameron Berryhill was the one to kind of introduce us and tell me that, yeah, Ezra knows who you are and, kind of wants to do what you're doing. And then from there it was like, we joke around, we'd have inside jokes, if Ethan was losing, he, maybe give me the stink eye or say, all right, you gotta go to your car, something like that. But it was always awesome to see him at those softball games and football games.
And by the way, I don't know if you know about this, but he made contact with a lot of different colleges and professional teams in our area. TCU, University of North Texas. He did work in the football equipment room for TCU and North Texas. He was the ball boy at North Texas games, and he spent a couple of afternoons at the Texas Rangers facility working with their athletic equipment manager. His name is Brandon Boyd, and he got access to the locker room, to all the equipment. He left at the end of the day. He had a baseball bat signed by Adrian Beltre, and he had a bunch of Texas Rangers gear that they had given him. I'm like, oh my gosh, Ezra, tell me you didn't steal this. He goes, no, they just gave it to me. But it's Ezra. He developed a relationship with Brandon Boyd. He could text Brandon Boyd anytime he wanted to, and he would have 2 tickets at the will call window at the Rangers game that night. It was incredible.
That's awesome, man. So going back to last week with your foundation, uh, you were able to go out to Fort Worth Dunbar and help out some people there, incoming freshmen, Sanaya McDade, whose father just recently passed away in June. Then you guys were able to donate some shoes along with Varsity Spirit Group. Yeah, just talk about going out there and helping the McDade family.
Okay. Well, I got a call from the Varsity Spirit Group on June 26th of this year. And I have a long time relationship with people from Varsity because when I was in college, I was an athlete, but I was a collegiate cheerleader because I wasn't good enough to play football or baseball or basketball when I graduated from high school. But much like Ezra, I figured out that I would be able to get on the field if I was a cheerleader. So I tried out for cheerleading my freshman year of college. That got me on the field for football games and basketball games and every other sporting event. But cheerleading has had a profound impact on my life. And I've known some of these people with Varsity for over 40 years. And in fact, my wife, who I've been married to for 32 years, she was a collegiate cheerleader at Oklahoma State. And cheerleading is what brought Jill and I together many years ago. And we stayed involved with those people. Varsity Spirit Group, Senior Royal with Varsity Spirit Group called me on June 26th and said, we want to help the Ezra Cox Foundation in some way. We have some pairs of cheerleading shoes that are new old stock, and we'd like to donate them to the Ezra Cox Foundation. And I said, that's great, Sini. How many pairs are we talking about? She says, 250 pairs of cheerleading shoes. And I'm like, 250 pairs? That's going to take the rest of my life to get those distributed out. And she goes, well, we're going to send them to you. So go to work. Well, last April, well, let me back up a little bit. That same day, unbeknownst to us, the coach, June 26th, the coach for Dunbar High School posted on Facebook and said she needed some help for her squad because she had a girl who had just lost her father and her mother needed help financially because high school sports is not cheap. You know this.
Yeah.
You got to spend a lot of money out of pocket to get cheerleading uniforms, cheerleading dues, you name it. And she didn't have the money. This girl was a sibling, one of 4 kids in a family. And so, so her name was Angela Batts, the coach at Dunbar High School. So back in April, a lady by the name of Miriam Stevenson, she goes to our church, and I knew who she was, but I didn't really know her personally. She called me one day, odd day, and said, James, Ezra has been on my heart, and I want to do something for the Ezra Cox Foundation, but I don't know what that is. Can you tell me where you need help? Or she said, my husband's a police officer with the Fort Worth Police Department, and we can get volunteers to come help you at an event or whatever you need. And I said, Miriam, we really don't have anything going on, but I'm going to keep your name. And the first time I have a need, you'll be the first one I called. So we were actually up in Oregon for Easton's orientation, and I got a call from my warehouse manager here at Jim Cox Sales, and he said, James, are we getting in the athletics business now? And I go, why? What? He goes, we got a pallet delivered to the office today. It's about a 7-foot tall pallet, and it's got 250 pairs of cheerleading shoes. What is this? And I told them the story. So I called Miriam from Oregon, and I said, Miriam, you said you wanted to help. Do you still want to be involved? She goes, oh, yes. And I said, well, this is what I need from you. I need you to start contacting local high schools and middle schools. And I need you to find cheerleading programs that need cheerleading shoes. And we will go to those schools and we will just start distributing out these shoes to schools who are in need. And Miriam said, well, James, most of these schools have already ordered all their cheerleading equipment. And, maybe these schools, they could just use them as practice shoes or whatever. And I said, Miriam, I'm not talking about schools that just need shoes for practice schools. I'm talking about schools that don't have any shoes. I want you to use the influence you have with the Fort Worth Police Department, and I want you to get in to Title I schools and find out where there is need. And so we had about 6 Fort Worth police officers that were going around to Title I schools at the beginning of July and inquiring on whether these schools would need some assistance or be willing to take some assistance. And Dunbar was the first one that responded. And she told Miriam, when Miriam got a hold of her, said, I didn't even know organizations like the Ezra Cox Foundation existed. She said, the timing is unbelievable. Yes, we have a need because we're a Title I school. And moreover, it just so happens that a young lady, incoming freshman, Cynthia McDade, Sanaya McDade's father just passed away on June 2nd of this year. And so she said, would the Ezra Cox Foundation be willing to help this family financially with their cheerleading uniforms, cheerleading dues, whatever? Of course, I said, Miriam, this is a no-brainer. Yes, we're going to do that. So I set the time and the date with Angela Batts, the coach. What was it, June 27th? What was last Thursday? 7th, 27th? July 27th.
Yeah.
So that's where we went to Dunbar High School at 5 p.m. And there were 7 Fort Worth Police Department officers involved, including the division chief of those officers, who's taken a huge interest in the Ezra Cox Foundation, was just so impressed in what we did. And there were also 8 members of the Champion Cheer Squad. That's an all-star cheerleading squad for elementary school age kids. They were there. My parents were there. Some other of my family were there. Sini Royal and another representative, Lana Hudson, with the Varsity Spirit Group, was there. And 4 of my board members from the Ezra Cox Foundation were there, which was great, Brian, because a lot of times when we do helmets or things, it's just a one kid deal.
Yeah.
And it's usually just me in the entryway of my home presenting this item to this kid, and we take pictures or whatever, but nobody ever gets to see that. So they never get to experience what I get to experience, the joy of being able to do this in Ezra's name. And man, it was just a fantastic day. We distributed 19 pairs of cheerleading shoes out to the Dunbar High School cheerleading squad. And then at the end, I brought Sanaya up to the front. And really, I had a quick message for all the girls, but this one was particularly for Sanaya, although she didn't realize what was happening at the time. And my message was to these girls is look, if you live life long enough, eventually, at some point, you will experience some type of a tragedy in your life. And it may be a financial tragedy, it may be a relationship type tragedy, or you may experience the loss of a loved one or a family member. And I said, I told them that when you experience loss, it involves grief and it involves pain. And in the case of losing a family member, it's very deep grief and deep pain. And I've experienced that in my own life with losing Ezra. And it's just not emotional pain, Brian. It's physical pain. It's mental pain. And in Sanaya's case, if that family member happens to pass away who is a wage earner, well, then it can cause financial pain. And so the whole point was, it's not whether bad things are going to happen to you in life. It's that it's how you respond to them and how you handle those adversities. Because I think it's important to realize, and I probably realized this in my life more than anything, while Ezra's passing was tragic and it caused deep, deep pain in my life, and not only my life, but at the same time, I was have to manage with the emotions of my wife and my other two children. Um, you know, tragic. But because of the Ezra Cox Foundation, we have created triumph out of that tragedy. And we are doing triumphant things in Ezra's name. And the simple fact of the matter is, Brian, if Ezra Cox was still alive, we would have never been at Dunbar High School last Thursday. That would have never happened. And I was reminded of that simple fact. The first varsity football game at Eaton last year, I was sitting in the stands, so excited to watch Eason play his senior year of high school. I looked at one of my football family members and I said, Ryan, this isn't right. Ezra should be here taking pictures. And he told me the very exact same thing. He looked at me just stone cold as he could. And he said, James Cox, what are you talking about? He said, if Ezra was here right now, there'd be two girls that wouldn't be able to cheerleading right now. There'd be a kid that didn't have a football helmet to play football. And there'd be a bunch of baseball players who couldn't play baseball anymore because they didn't have the money to pay Cooperstown Cages to be involved in their program ran any longer. And I said, all right, Ryan, you're right. I'm going to shut up and stop crying about this. And we're going to start doing great things in Ezra's name with the foundation. And that's what we've been doing. But we gave Sanaya a check for $800 to cover all of her costs. I think the actual number was 800. What is it, Jill? 852 or something like that. We didn't know what the exact number were at the time. But man, it was just a great, great event. And we're so glad that we did it. And because, and we've also got two more Title I schools that we're going to be doing that for in the very near future. And if you'd like me to, I can give you the times and dates of those events. If you'd like to be there just to witness what happens. And, we'd love to have you for sure. And the other big benefit of getting the Fort Worth Police Department involved is the division chief. I can't remember his name right off the top of my head. I got it in my phone if you want me to look it up. But he was very, very impressed with what we did that day. And he wants the Fort Worth Police Department to have a huge role with the Ezra Cox Foundation. And I wouldn't say we're partnering up, but he wants to be an advocate for this foundation and get us into other places in Fort Worth where otherwise we probably wouldn't be able to get into.
Awesome. Awesome. That's great stuff. Beautiful stuff, James. Keep it going. I know Ezra's looking down. He's happy. He's proud what you guys are doing. So
I know he is. I kid people. I say every time we do this, I know Ezra looks down and he can see it. And he is doing back handsprings down his golden street that he lives on in heaven. And he is shouting to the top of his voice, look what these people are doing. This is me. This is my name. And so, yeah, I know he loves it. And to be honest with you, I love it too. I really do. I just want to keep doing it over and over and over again.
Awesome. Hey, appreciate you so much, James.
Hey, I appreciate you.
Thanks.
You bet. Take care.